Hi guys, this devlog covers two main things. The first one, I improved the gameplay by refactoring the spawning code. That introduces a bug which takes me ages to fix. The second part of the devlog, I'm covering audio. So I put in the game sound effects and music, cover the way that I'm doing the transitions between them. I build an audio manager to manage all the sounds centrally in one place. Alright, let's get into it. Alright, I have done the refactoring of my object pooling code. Well, it's not so much the object pooling, it's more about spawning those objects. So I've created a new class called a prefab spawner. This is now the one that does all the work, and as a result the food manager and obstacle manager are now a lot simpler. So the obstacle manager has still got two different spawners because the set of objects which spawns across the top of the screen is different from the ones at the bottom of the screen. But now all it needs to do is simply create a spawner, give it some settings so I can control everything just with this one line. And then the food manager is actually even simpler because it's only got one of them. And as a result of this, I've also managed to improve the functionality quite a bit. So hold on one moment, I will show you. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you it running. So I've turned Toasty off for the moment so you can just kind of see the objects as they're spawning. So the food, what I had done before was I'd set kind of a central position across the middle of the screen and then had it just kind of randomly either go at the top or go at the bottom or go in the middle. Now I've got it so it can kind of spawn randomly anywhere within a range here, but I wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to overlap the various obstacles. Now if we click over into scene view, these circles here, this is a debugging thing. So what it's doing is, also if you have a look over here, this is my object pool. I've just placed it off the edge of the screen so I can visually see there's my pool of objects. And then what's happening here is these are the three spawners. So the top one is for the obstacles which are going across the top rail, the bottom one is for the obstacles which appear on the counter, and the middle one is for the food. And these are jumping about as each object is spawned, and it's checking to see is there anything else in the way. So of course the objects actually spawn just off the edge of the screen here, and then they just move across. So this works pretty nicely now. So if I come back over to the game, so now we've got a lot more oh no, still a bug. There's still a bug there, an overlap. I haven't quite figured out why. Occasionally it still overlaps and I don't know why. I thought it was due to, oh, it's another one. I thought it was due to timing. So yeah, that's annoying. Other than the occasional bug, I think this is working much better now. We've got a much more kind of randomized food spawn, so I think that will make the gameplay a little bit more interesting, because as I had it before, it was getting very predictable. It's a case of like you go up and then you go down and then you go up and then you go down, and it was just very predictable and it's getting quite boring. So this will make it a bit more dynamic and a little bit more interesting, but obviously I still need to fix that bug. Okay, I have finally managed to fix the spawning bug, but I think I might have kind of overfixed it in a way. If you have a look at these green circles on the right now, you'll see that in some cases a food item like that one will pop on and then it will disappear again. So yeah, so that one disappeared, and it's because it's supposedly too close to another object. Now some of them, like that one and the one that was near that grater, are very obviously too close, but some of them are then being despawned when perhaps they shouldn't be. Now this is better than I had before, but let me show you how I've done that. So that would have been right on top of the sponge. So what I've done is I figured that the reason this system wasn't working immediately is that if the objects, if say the food is being spawned at pretty much the same time as one of the obstacles at the top or the bottom of the screen, the actual physics collider, which is the thing it's checking with, hasn't actually been instantiated yet. So what I've done is I've introduced the idea of a kind of a double check. So what I've got is that when you create the spawner, there's an extra parameter that you can set, which is a double check. And on the food one, I've set this to true. On the obstacle, it's still false. And then all this does is when I'm doing the spawn object, where is it? If we've got the double check set, it just does a coroutine, which is like a delay to double check for the overlaps half a second later. So this is doing the same check as it does initially, which is just have a look to see if there are any overlapping objects within that check radius. Now it will return itself. So if the colliders is a length of 1, then it's just colliding with itself. So it's only checking if it's got more than one object there, and then all it does is it just despawns it. I'm not trying to be clever about it. So this, if I just play this now in the game view without looking at that, I've turned Toasty off again so you can actually just see it spawning. It should now play properly without any overlaps, but there might be sections where there's not a huge amount of food to collect. So I can continue to sort of tweak this a little bit, maybe increase the food spawns, but at least now I don't have the bug, which is the main important thing. It was obviously a problem if the objects were overlapping. So I think this is okay now. It's not a perfect solution. I don't really like the way I've had to do it, but again, it's just my first game. You got to learn. At least I've got something that kind of works, and if I was to do something similar to this in a future game, I would rethink the way I've done it perhaps. Today I've been working on getting a basic kind of system put in for sound effects. So what I've done, I don't really know what I'm doing yet, but I've just kind of looked at a couple of tutorials. I've created a class called an audio manager. So this has just got an audio source and then some clips which I've set in code. Now, one thing that I alluded to before was that this is completely event driven. So I haven't changed any of the code in my previous objects. Actually, tell a lie, yes, I have. I have created a new event to say that the player has jumped. So I could put in a jump audio. And then the audio player simply responds to those events. And all it does is it plays the audio source. Now, the way I've done this is I've hard coded each individual clip. So obviously this is not scalable. It only works because I've just got a handful of sounds. Obviously if this had hundreds of sounds, it would be a complete mess. But for a simple game like this, it kind of works. Now already I don't like it. So the jump sound, yeah, that's very loud and annoying. Now if you die, so if I crash into something, yeah, I'm someone who's very sound sensitive, so most sounds annoy the hell out of me. Now, if you die, there's also a problem. So if you listen, so what happened there is this is a limitation of what I've done at the moment. It's responding to both of the events that the player has hit an obstacle and also that the game is over. And so it's playing them both. Now, really what I would want to do is detect some way to sort of play the game over but without playing the obstacle, but because they're two separate events, I don't know how to do that. And another thing I don't know how to do at the moment, the way I have done it at the moment is that this audio source can be sort of controlled. You can have like the volume. Actually, I wonder if I can do that for the jump. So I wonder if I can do audio source dot, is there a volume? Yeah, equals 0.1f. That might work. Make the jump quieter. Oh, better. It's still annoying. So yeah, this is just the very first kind of rough draft, and as like with all my other games, the sounds are taken from different places. They don't sort of like fit together in any way. But sound is one of those things that I think I'm always going to struggle with. But it will do for now, so I will have a fiddle with it. I haven't looked into music for like a background thing. Now one thing I will want to do is, I think I have mentioned this before, if I load my main menu and then unload that one, then when I play now, this should start off in my main menu. Yeah, so I've now must have changed the graphic. So I've got some options here. Now obviously this is just placeholder stuff, so this is where I'm going to want to put in sound options to sort of like turn down the sound overall, which is what somebody like me would want, because I actually don't like noisy things. So yeah, so I'll continue to work on the audio, and then next I'll be looking at actually rigging it up somehow to this, and again, not something I know how to do yet. So today I am looking at the music for the game, now that I've got a couple of sound effects in there. So I really like using Itch. They've got a great search engine for any kind of asset. So I've just come here to assets and I have tagged it with music. I should probably put free because it's probably not something that I would really pay for. And I've come across this pack here from Tallbeard Studios. So this is them, and they've actually got a load of stuff. They don't seem to be charging for anything. Obviously you can donate, which I haven't done for the moment. And then all I do is I download them and then I load them up into VLC, because that allows me to just kind of like very quickly using the keyboard just go through, have a bit of a listen, go to the next one. So what I'm looking for is something that feels kind of... Now I like music like this, kind of like the kind of dance music, but it's not the right feel for this game, I don't think. That I quite like. So I'm looking for something that's maybe a bit more kind of like a happy, jolly kind of... So definitely not something like that, dark and ominous. But the game's supposed to be kind of like light-hearted and fun. So yeah, so this is like my process for finding audio. If it doesn't grab me within the first few seconds, I'm probably not going to use it. What I like about these is they're all loops, so it doesn't matter how long somebody spends in the menu. So what I'm looking for is... But actually I can't talk while I'm listening. Let me turn these off. So I guess what I'm looking for really is something where the menu... So I've got two bits of music that I want. One for the menu and one for the actual gameplay. So the menu can be something that is quite a short loop, because I wouldn't expect someone to stay in the menu for very long really, unless they were just fiddling with the sound options. But obviously the gameplay needs to be something that can loop for a long time without being too irritating. Mind you, say that I say a long time, obviously this isn't a game that's supposed to be played for hours. I've talked about that before. It is a kind of a short thing. So yeah, I'm not looking for massively long tracks, but once I've got that in there, the next thing will be to have it actually play the right kind of music with each scene, and then I'm going to have to deal with the transition between the scenes, because that's something that I struggled with in my earlier games. Alright, so what I've done now is I've made a few changes. So I've got myself a music track. Now I only found one track that I liked, so what I've done is I've used the same track for both the menu and the game. However, I've used just a small loop of it for the menu, and I've also slowed it down slightly. So this is kind of taken from the main track. If I play the main one, it's the same thing but a little bit different. But what I've also done is my audio manager, I've moved over to the main menu, and I've put in two separate child objects which have each got their own audio source. So the reason I've done that is so that I can just refer to them individually within the code, because also I'm going to want to be able to adjust the volume individually later on. Now, code wise, so this is all still the same. I've now put the music source here and the sound effects source, and then I've set up the actual music clips in there, and then the food as before. Sorry, not the food, the sound effects as before. So this is the audio manager class, and this is quite simple. So again, it's all event driven, but now it's got something quite important in here. Don't destroy on load. So because it's in the main menu, I don't want the object to be destroyed when I then switch scenes, because when you switch scenes, everything gets destroyed and then reinstantiated. So this one says no, persist please. And then I have just got a little bit of a helper function here for the music. So what this does is it uses a coroutine to fade in the music over a certain amount of time. I found that 1.5 seconds kind of works in quite nicely. And then the same kind of thing, so I'm responding to events. So for the, I've got an event now, so I did have to change a couple of things in my main menu. I just invoke, actually I only needed to change one line of code, which was basically add this one. I already had an event for on game started, and that's the beauty of the event system. I didn't have to go and change anything in my game manager because it's already got an event for the game starting. Now this sends through a parameter for the maximum lives, and I don't need that obviously for the music, but I just take the parameter in and just don't do anything with it. I ignore it. It's the same thing with some of the others. And then what I've done is here is I've just put in some little helper functions for myself, so you can just adjust the music. And then I found a better way of adjusting the volume on an individual sound effect. So earlier on in this devlog, I had just set the volume of the audio source before playing the jump, and whilst that worked, it then changed the volume for the audio source for everything else. So let me show you how it's working now and see how you think it sounds. So I'm playing the main menu at this point, so you can hear it fades in that loop, and now if I press play, then fades in the main game music, and now we've got the sound effects, the collect. You can hear the jump bounding around. I did turn that down a fair bit. And if I crash, carries on playing. There we go. Now I've still got the same bug where it'll also play the game over, but I'll come back to that later. But overall, I'm pretty happy with the way that I've got the sound now, and the way that I've managed to basically encompass everything to do with sound in this one simple file. So I don't have to go and change a million things. So this has made it a lot easier to kind of fiddle around with the volumes and get it sounding kind of how I like it. So yeah, I'm quite pleased with this so far. That's all I've got for this particular devlog. I feel like I haven't really covered very much, just basically refactoring and then doing some audio. One thing that I found was that once I had implemented the main Flappy Bird mechanics, I was able to do that pretty quickly because I'd watched several tutorials on it. At that point, the progress just massively slowed down, because everything that I wanted to do after that are things that aren't sort of covered by tutorials, or certainly not the ones that I had watched. And so at this point I was kind of like on my own. So I had to take a couple of days out where I just sort of like had a break from the game, went back to watching some more tutorials, just like random tutorials, not anything to do with this particular project, and just kind of sort of step away from it. The actual bug to do with that overlapping in my spawning code, that took me ages to fix. It's taken me a little while to fiddle around with the audio as well, because I hadn't really seen how to do that. So I had to find some individual tutorials, how to put in an audio source, an audio manager, and all these sorts of things. And similarly going forward, there's lots more things I want to add to the game, and I don't have a clue how to do any of them. So it's probably going to be slow going to kind of get the game finished at this point and put in the sort of polish that I need to do. But it's to be expected, really. When I'm doing my first project, there's an awful lot which is an unknown. So as before, if you want to play the game in the current state, it's on itch.io. It's play in browser. You can literally just play it directly in there. I'd appreciate your feedback if you've got any comments on it. I think that's about everything. So yeah, thanks very much for watching, guys. Speak to you next time.